Hello and welcome. Apologies for taking a little while just to settle in. I don't really have the means to edit or change these videos, so you can just speed through that little part if you wish. It is the nature of this channel. It's unprepared, unplanned, unrehearsed, unedited. So hopefully in that respect coming from the heart, and by that I mean from a place of truth, coming from experience of this practice, the practice of the Buddhist path, that is the Noble Eightfold Path we call Buddhism and Buddhist practice. On the first comment is not so much a question, maybe a comment. I'll read it out as it's written. Why wouldn't you strive for celibacy as a layperson? Wearing robes just means the practice is easier. You should strive to keep the best practice to your abilities. Stop being soft on lay people. So I'm not sure who that's addressed to. I'm not often described as being soft on anyone or coming across as soft. More often a comment would be that I'm rather harsh with regards to the practice and seemingly strictness of practice, but not so much strictness, but more disciplined. I think one needs to be disciplined in determinations. The word determinations in Pali is adhitthana, and adhitthana is one of the parami, one of the qualities we develop, the power to be able to make a determination and stick by it. This we just know as discipline in the English language. And the Buddha gives us two paths. I just mentioned the path of practice, and it's quite clearly defined in the precepts we take. As lay practitioners, 5 precepts: no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. Or we can, as monastics or living in a monastery, increase those precepts to either 8, which includes celibacy rather than refraining from sexual misconduct, and then 10 or 227 as a bhikkhu, or 311 as a bhikkhuni, that is a monk or a nun. Those additional precepts or codes of conduct rather than rules are supportive of those main precepts. But only living in a monastery or in monastic life does the Buddha make it very clear through the Vinaya, that is the monastic rules, that celibacy is essential, because you are renouncing worldly life and the need for relationships. And being that any form of sexual activity is a stimulation of those desires, those carnal desires, sexual desire specifically, it is strictly forbidden for monks and nuns. After ordination, or when living in a monastery, we remain celibate. That's the way it is. And this is supportive of the practice for the reasons I've spoken of so many times before. And yes, I agree with you that that is the surest way to be able to dedicate yourself to the practice 100%. But the Buddha creates this fourfold assembly, or 2 paths, where we have lay practitioners, laymen, laywomen, and monastics, monks and nuns, supportive of each other. And for lay practitioners to continue within society and also to have relationships, build families, and further generations who may ordain and become monks. After all, if everyone was celibate, there would be no new generations, no lay people or new monks or nuns. So recognizing this essential part of humanity, the Buddha divides our practice into these two paths, lay practitioners or monastics. I would not dare to go as far and say that when you say wearing the robes, I think you mean ordination, that ordination and living the monastic life, the life of a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni, is in any sense of the word easier by comparison to anything else. I would say actually, having practiced both in lay life and as a monk, as a bhikkhu, it's much easier to practice in lay life, even if you choose in lay life to take 8 precepts, which is everyone's choice and option. And I often make that clear and say that you should perhaps at least once a month or once a week even, on a regular basis anyway, adopt the 8 precepts, because it is supportive of your meditation practice. But there is no necessity for lay practitioners to remain or to be celibate. Of course, it is conducive to practice, supportive of practice, but if one is in a relationship, it isn't fair on the other party. One might as well leave that relationship and say, right, I'm going to ordain and go and become a monk or a nun. And that was not recommended by the Buddha. One keeps to one's responsibilities and duties, but also enjoys that company and those loving relationships in conjunction with the practice, which too is very wholesome. So, what are you actually asking? Nothing. I think you're just making a point. You clearly find it possible as a lay practitioner, if that's what you must be, otherwise you would be not making that comment, leading a life of celibacy, and that's fine. You're a single person or in a relationship that's very understanding of that, and that is your way. But this is not what the Buddha ever suggested should be taught, promoted, or required of the practice. The Noble Eightfold Path, in terms of all of its aspects, and including these precepts, this sila, moral virtue, states in the 3rd precept, refraining from sexual misconduct, only refraining from sexual activity when one extends that to 8 precepts. Living in the monastery for that reason and that purpose, and that reason and that purpose alone. Externally, it's okay. So why wouldn't you strive for celibacy as a lay person? You can. And perhaps if you're thinking of entering monastic life, thinking of ordination, then it's a good idea to take up that practice. And, like I'm often suggesting, by taking 8 precepts on a regular basis, where you're also refraining from entertainment. Now, I'm assuming the person who's making that comment keeps all of those 5 precepts, absolutely. And I would hope that in addition to celibacy, they're refraining from entertainment, so they're at least keeping the rest of the 8 precepts and have no necessity either to eat in the afternoon. That would be living on 8 precepts, which is halfway between lay life and monastic life, and a way I personally lived for some 9 more than 5 years, I think. Just trying to think now. Yeah, more than 5 years anyway. So it was conducive to my practice, but I had an end goal, an intention to ordain. Otherwise, I would have made my practice, my meditation, my keeping of the 5 precepts fit in to ordinary life. That is, I would have had work to do, I would have had perhaps relationships and a family and responsibilities, but having renounced all of that and heading towards and intending to ordain, I kept 8 precepts, only because there were delays in opportunities for me to ordain. Did it go for so long? But I did find it a very productive way of practicing, very conducive to my meditation practice and supportive of living somewhere halfway between. But it never was an intention to stay in that state, that sitting on the fence, that betwixt state, in between state, between lay life and monastic life. It was always a transitional thing, because you will find what happens when you are practicing living on 8 precepts in lay life fully for a long time. Your practice becomes more fruitful, your meditation becomes more enjoyable, and you start to develop nibbida, this disenchantment that we strive towards. So what I always say is we're striving towards nibbida, disenchantment with worldly activities through the practice of sila, samadhi, panya. Not strive for celibacy. You won't get celibacy striving for it. That's just pushing down feelings. That's suppressing feelings, suppressing emotions. Buddhist practice isn't about suppressing, isn't about hiding or ignoring emotions and feelings. It's about heading them face on, directly, and then eradicating the cause. So in lay life, one chooses to be celibate, but is going to be surrounded by distractions and things one cannot always guard one's senses from, that may veer you off the path of celibacy. So rather than having this ongoing battle, let it happen naturally. Eventually you will become indifferent, uninterested, disenchanted with such relationships. Eventually you'll find them quite nonsensical and hard to imagine why one would ever be interested in such things. But this comes with time through the practice, not by saying, "Oh, I'm so Buddhist, I'm such a good practitioner because I am celibate." That isn't what's required. That isn't the case. Not at all. So that's why I'm not soft. I'm only repeating what is clearly made out and stated for us in the Noble Eightfold Path and via these precepts. So I hope that's quite clear from my point of view, but your point of view is fine. There's each person to their own, isn't it, really? Each to their own. On a similar theme, in a way, I don't think being a lay person justifies sensuality. Well, I don't think being a monk or a nun, a monastic, justifies no sensuality. We can still enjoy nature, pleasant climates, the birds singing. We can enjoy good food, beautiful sunsets, views, vistas. What we're letting go of, as I was just describing there, through the practice of sila, samadhi, panya, is attachment to those things, reliance on those things, on all conditioned things, not just sensuality, but also what we don't like, ill will, aversion. There's no definition, no disparity between lay life and monastic life in that sense. That I'm not saying, oh, lay people, you go and have a big sensual hedonistic existence, and monks, you just look at a blank wall and never smile. No. Equally, we all enjoy what we've been given, what is beautiful, as much as we experience that is unattractive or uncomfortable. We're grateful for feelings of joy, happiness and pleasure resulting from external stimulation or through our practice, and accepting of pain, suffering and experience of what we don't like. But unattached from those experiences, not clinging to anything of this conditioned existence, with full appreciation of its impermanence, its cause of suffering, and it being completely out of our control, inclusive of our bodies and thinking brains. Nama Rupa, the physical body and thinking brain. So it's about not clinging, developing through that practice, like I just said, nibbida, disenchantment, rather than suppression. So I misunderstood someone's comment when they were talking about, and they say, what I meant by serious enough is that there is a localish temple of monks that handle money, and I think about them not really being serious enough because they don't follow the Vinaya. Okay, so I'm not sure who or what organisation you're referring to, but you'll appreciate that all temples, monasteries, sanghas, monks do not use money. We do not handle money, and therefore have no money. Someone asked me when I've mentioned about retirement in the past, retiring at 30 and then again at 40, that I must have sufficient money to fall back on one day. Well, even then, not really did I have sufficient money to fall back on one day. My form of retirement is, even prior to my practice of Buddhism, a establishment of a way of living that costs very little. Not only by comparison to most, but even by comparison to what is considered very basic and very normal. Finding a way to reduce your cost of living to negligible amounts is a way you can reduce the amount you have to work to support that cost of living, and therefore eventually live on very little indeed. So no, I and monks and sanghas don't have pots of money to fall back on, because we've renounced all of that. And this is why there is this Vinaya rule. We renounce the use of money in order that we are dependent on the generosity of others, and for that alone, for our daily requisites of food once a day in the morning, which I go on Pindapata to collect, the robes we wear, which is not much. We can make these last for many years, even decades, once offered once. Just the 3 robes. There's no change of these, hanging in a wardrobe somewhere. This is it. Simple shelter and basic medicine, as and when required. This is what we live on. And I was able to retire at that time in my 30s. I went to live abroad for a while, and I did then, or the first time, I did have money, I had an income, but I also lived very cheaply as I could, in the cheapest possible place that I could find, so that I could extend that time, making it a very long holiday, if you like. But for various reasons, I did return to work and then retired again later on in life, but again, not with pots of money in a retirement fund, but with a view to living very cheaply. Now, with regards to how money is structured and handled within temples and monasteries, yes, you'll see in monasteries donation boxes, ways that they raise funds for various projects, whether they're humanitarian or altruistic projects, whether they're just for the necessities that I've just mentioned, the basic requisites that the Sangha requires, or other things, sometimes building or maintaining devotional structures. All of these aspects, the external physical asset-like objects of temples and monasteries, are owned by the lay people that support them and provide them, really, or they are for the use of the lay people that support them. The monks themselves and nuns themselves need very little, just a little room or shelter, covered area somewhere for their practice and to sleep at night. So I don't know the organisation you're talking about, but the simple fact is monks don't use money, but there is a requirement for some basic necessities. So for in my case, living alone here, everything is provided, but still we need internet to have this conversation and this, albeit very cheap, equipment to provide access to that internet for this conversation. There are occasional extra medical expenses, such as for myself, because I'm old, my teeth are falling to bits. I've never been one to go to the dentist. I've avoided the dentist all of my life, since a child or since my teenage years, when I had my wisdom teeth out, until recently, when really just through, I'm 57, nearly 58, my teeth are starting to crumble, break. So as they've broken and needed repair, I've lately had to visit the dentist and have some, whatever they call it, put in, replacing this broken ones, and root canals and caps and crowns or whatever, which, albeit relatively, by Western standards, it's cheap here, these things need funding. I have to have visas to stay here, which have to be replaced from time to time. And also, in order to satisfy the rules of those visas, occasionally you have to leave the country and return. The nature of this living out of your own country does cost a little bit. Now, not a great deal by comparison to if I was living in my own country. That would probably be a problem. I would need accommodation that's legal. This wouldn't be a legal structure in my own country, the UK. The authorities would come around and say, you can't live in those conditions. In fact, I had this experience myself, living in a van on the beach for 3 years in the UK. The authorities would come along and say, right, you're a sort of a middle-aged man, you shouldn't be living in these conditions, we'll offer you what would you call it, local authority accommodation, a council house we used to call it in the olden days. And I would say, thank you very much, but as soon as I can, I'm off out of here to another country where I can live where I like, how I like, to a certain extent, without such conditions. But nevertheless, looking at society around you, there's always some expenses. And the way this is handled is not by the monks themselves or the nuns themselves. Any donations that are made online, in my case, go to a non-profit organisation, which is then, those funds are available for me to use or point in the right direction, let's say, for the purchase of, say, those plane tickets or visas or any extra costs that may be incurred over and above the normal daily requisites required of a monk or a nun. There is the opportunity, I suppose, as a monk or a nun, to just wander off into the wilderness alone until you're caught up with. But even in the book, A Cave in the Snow, I've forgotten her name, Tenzin Palmer, the nun who lived in India, northeast India, even the authorities there, she was living on her own in solitude in a cave, literally in the snow, for 12 years or so, eventually caught up with her, even though she had no contact with the outside world. And in those days, this was 20, 30 years ago now, maybe 40 years ago now. No internet, no social media. Even so, the authorities caught up with her. She didn't have a visa, and that's why she had to leave India in the end. Not too drastic, she's now able to return and back there, but it was something that now, of course, is very much more obvious and technically orientated, so one has to abide by. But by comparison, for my purposes, me living here in this country or me living in my own country, the only way I could afford to live in my own country would be within a monastery, an already established monastery. And by their reckoning, it costs a lot more to keep a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni, because you hear what their requirements are through their fundraising activities, which are usually fairly transparent, quite huge sums of money. I mean, they jokingly say, oh, it costs as much to run a monk as it does a large dog, but it doesn't when you take into account all the surroundings and furniture and infrastructure and things supporting that existence of that one monk or that bhikkhuni. Me living here alone doesn't require any of that. This building was empty and already here. It costs nothing. We give them to them a substantial donation annually for helping with the maintenance. And we, you that is, the non-profit organisation, pay for the electricity here, and this just SIM card, normal internet. They don't really have Wi-Fi here. Just normal internet, whatever you call it these days, 4G or something. And that costs very little money indeed. But it is necessary, in order for that to continue, that we, so I include you in that, receive those donations. But that isn't handling money. So yeah, you will see there are exceptions. You'll see monks and temples that take this Vinaya rule with a different approach, either literally, in that because it's worded handling gold and silver, seems to imply that they can use money, or a little bit more vaguely by saying, well, if they're writing checks or using credit cards or debit cards, it's not really using money. And some even just handle cash because it's not gold or silver, whatever. But that is, in a sense, having any decision-making process over the use of money, not a decision-making process, but taking a wallet of some form, whatever the payment method is in it, even say a phone that can pay, to a shop to buy something for yourself, is technically using money, isn't it? So that's what we try to avoid doing, unless it was absolutely necessary. But for seeing a dentist, one could use an online payment or credit card facility if it isn't owned by the monk but owned by the non-profit organisation or the Sangha, whichever it is that is supporting you in your practice. So that's really how it should work, without too much obscurity and full transparency as to where your money goes when you go to that said temple. So they're probably taking it seriously, but there are maybe practicalities that need to be considered when being fair to criticise them on that point. But I understand now what you were referring to. I think I've spoken a bit too much about that point now, but there we are. It came up. Now, does awareness form an obligation? How can bodhisattvas help all Theravadas get on with it, even if it proves us wrong? I think that's two questions. So does awareness form an obligation? So, no. Let's talk about mindfulness rather than awareness. Now there is a stage that a lot of practitioners experience and go through when they begin to practice. There are some various stages which are considered, let's say, a little uncomfortable and maybe a little off-putting. If you're practicing well, you're practicing meditation, developing the quality of this vipassana to see clearly. So you're establishing through meditation the ability to concentrate, which gives you the foundation and the basis for sustained mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities. This isn't an obligation, it's a quality you've developed. But sometimes this heightened sense of awareness and this extra vigilance, this mindfulness on each and every thing you experience and do, can be a little bit unsettling. at first. People often coming out of, say, Vipassana retreats, the SN Goenka Vipassana retreats, which are so popular, after 10 or 14 days intensive meditation, leaving those environments can be very, very shocked and would be advised not to drive home, for instance. They're not necessarily, but they should be, because the heightened sense of awareness resulting from that very intensive course of practiced meditation, developing clear seeing and very strong mindfulness, can then, when leaving that retreat and what I was talking about the other day, that artificially created environment of seclusion to support the practice, exiting that can be quite shocking. For instance, driving on a busy road through a busy town with all that's going on, the noises and sounds that you've become unused to, whilst enhancing your sense of awareness through the practice. All of it becomes rather dramatic and rather frightening. So that's a rather impractical way of establishing mindfulness, because what you'll immediately do, or very quickly do, the body and the brain will immediately react to that and withdraw and start to lose all that heightened sense of awareness, start to lose that mindfulness, that quality of mindfulness. So suddenly the qualities of vipassana, the qualities of sati that you've developed, are pushed down because they become a little bit off-putting, a little bit scary even, in a busy, shocking, what can seem like a shocking environment. So people will find then this mindfulness, this heightened sense of awareness, oh, I don't really like that so much. I can really see that this isn't much fun, what I'm doing, when I look at it mindfully. But you soon, very quickly, if you're practicing consistently, so not just practicing on your 10-day or 14-day retreat, which is useless if you then just push it all down until the next retreat. But you practice every day for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, like I always say. I'm not being soft on you lay practitioners here, like I was just accused of. Being very firm, no excuse for not meditating for 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. So an hour after you wake up, an hour before you go to sleep. What's the excuse? You haven't got time, so sleep 2 hours less. Unless you're already sleeping less than 4 to 6 hours, then you need you need at least 4 to 6 hours. But most people are sleeping 8 to 12. If that's the case, you only need to be sleeping maximum 10, 9, 8. 8 is really the maximum. Any human being, adult, in health, good health, needs to be sleeping, a maximum, I would say. Anything more than that is a waste of your life, absolutely. The time we cannot be mindful is when we're asleep. It's the opposite of mindfulness, it's asleep. Buddha means awakened one, not sleeping one. So you're doing the opposite of Buddhism, being asleep. This is why we're encouraged as monks and nuns. Back to the first comment, it might seem easy, but we're not supposed to sleep very much. We eat little, sleep little, speak little is the goal, or the intention, and the practice. It's everything. Eating little, sleeping little, speaking little. That isn't easy for most people. And saying that, however, it is qualities about your life you can develop. So by sleeping little and practicing meditation in the morning and the evening, every day, you will develop this heightened sense of awareness and mindfulness gradually, and it will be sustained mindfulness. Sati Sampajana, mindfulness in all of your daily activities, in everything that's going on. This is the practice. How can bodhisattvas help Theravadas get on with it? I mean, these are just words, names. People following the Noble Eightfold Path are just that. It's called Buddhism. We're called Buddhists. These are just conventional labels. Clinging to anything of this conventional world is to be avoided. This is the main teaching of Buddhism, the Buddha says in his own words. I've forgotten the Pali comment, but in fact I probably never knew it in Pali, but it's there in the Dhammapada. And I must say, as well as your practice of meditation, maybe rather than delving so deeply into individual suttas, if you haven't yet, and you probably have, if you haven't read the Dhammapada at least a few times, time and time again, keep reading the Dhammapada. Keep it by your bedside, keep it by your toilet, keep it anywhere where you can just pick it up and dive into it. It's continually reminding you of these valuable golden nuggets of Buddhist teachings. Whatever you are, Mahayana, Theravada, whether you think you're an Arahant, a Sotapanna or a Bodhisattva, these are just names that someone's given you or you give yourself. It's fueling your ego, fueling your Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view. Drop all that, let go of it. It's all of this conditioned world. We are not clinging to anything of this conditioned world. All conditioned things. Let go. So how can bodhisattvas help Theravadas? It doesn't even make sense. Get on with it. As bodhisattvas, if you call yourself that, as Theravada, Mahayana, Zen, Pure Land, Triratna, it doesn't matter. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. This is the practice, the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's how we help everyone else in the world. Then you're a true bodhisattva, aren't you? You sit and you just practice and you're developing Sila, Samadhi, Panya. You're giving the greatest gift you can give to all beings by keeping the 5 precepts, because you cannot do any harm either to yourself or to others. That is the gift of fearlessness. That is dana, generosity in itself. Far more valuable than any dana or generosity you can give to the temple, to those monks who want the money or the monks that need the donations. This is needed for their practice and fully appreciated and received with gratitude. But what is needed more is that you understand the Dharma and the teachings and you are able to keep the precepts. The giving, the generosity, the dana isn't in place of keeping precepts. Maybe by way of the balance of karma, it goes some way towards helping, but nowhere near as far as it does if you just keep the precepts, refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking intoxicants, that big one to many of the listeners that comment. And nothing will prove you wrong. None of us will be proving anything to anyone else, only experiencing for ourselves the results, the fruits of our own practice. Whatever you call yourself, however you understand the suttas, that is what the Buddha teaches. And that is there in the original or the core teachings of Buddhism. Take the Dhammacakka Sutta, the first discourse the Buddha ever gave to his monks, on the middle way, the middle path, the Noble Eightfold Path. And please help, it says, and Ajahn has told me guilt that I hold over a decision made in the past is ridiculous. I am 63 years old and Buddhism is only 18 months to me. Okay, so maybe he didn't mean to just say it's ridiculous, because it's quite normal for people to feel a little bit guilty, if normal's the right word to use, about something they've done in the past, either to harm others or themselves. Guilt isn't something we dwell on in Buddhism as a thing, because it's fruitless in itself. But we can have what's the word? Not resentment. Regret. We can be regretful over decisions we've made in the past because of their outcome. So, for example, no, I won't give that as an example. I was going to give an example of something. Well, I have to now, because I've opened, Sampapalapa coming out now, Eustace speech, but it's not, it's a good example. So I've forgotten what I was even going to say now. We're just generalised. If we regret what we've done in the past because of the outcome, in a way that is just a lesson. That is teaching us, isn't it? Ajahn means teacher, so that is the ajahn of regret. So that isn't ridiculous. Guilt maybe is, because it's just a feeling and emotion of not liking that regret that we apply as an additional layer on top of the regret. But what regret means is that you accept and realise that what you did was wrong. It either caused yourself harm, and what I was going to refer to was where I caused myself physical harm through acting too quickly, maybe through impatience, but also through fear of doing myself further injury, had some treatment that was probably not necessary, and therefore now have the results I have to live with for the rest of my life as a result of having that treatment, and therefore I regret that, but I don't feel guilty about it. Now, if I had suggested to someone else they'd done the same and they had the same problem, one might apply that extra layer of guilt to that regret, because you have an additional emotion exposing that regret, that you cause harm to another. But it's still the underlying regret. If you haven't learned by that mistake, by the realization, which is what regret is, that those actions were wrong, unnecessary, and caused harm, then guilt doesn't help, and it is ridiculous in that it's useless and doesn't help alleviate the problem. But if you can understand through the regret that you have over the decision you made, that you have learned and you wouldn't make that decision given that situation again, then what is there to feel guilty about? You cannot change the results. They're in the past and cannot be altered. But what you can do now, through what you've learned from that valuable regret, ajahn guilt, which isn't really guilt, is from here on after, you will never make that mistake again. So I had this old phrase my grandmother used to say to me, a stitch in time saves 9. So you get this little operation done quickly here, and it's a stitch in time saves 9. Perhaps I should have taken the first doctor's advice, whom said, just leave it alone for some years, you'll be okay. And then it would have been okay for some years. But I thought I knew best, and I didn't. If I'd been in a different place, back in my own country, it would have been different. Communications would have been easier, understanding would have been easier, medical histories and so on and so forth would have been clearer. So I don't blame anyone. If there was any blame, it's myself, but I don't blame myself. Who knows? We don't know. And we use that as a learning process. We turn the negative into the positive. Now, if there's anything you can do about changing the past by way of apology, that's okay, but that's as far as it goes. And often that can cause more trouble than it's worth. So it's best to just leave it alone, usually, and move on. But you've learned and you won't do that again. So that's what Buddhism, how it deals and considers guilt and forgiveness. The same. We learn from the experience. We then develop a conscience, and we have conscientiousness of that conscience. We call hiri and ottappa. So we develop a real strong awareness of our moral virtue, so as we don't ever make that mistake again, whether it's to do with actions or speech. We're protected by conscience, conscientiousness of conscience, hiri and ottappa. Can I still keep Jesus in my heart without converting to Christianity? So this is the other way round. This is a Buddhist. I don't know if this is a Google Translate thing, but the commenter's using the word believe in karma, believe in Buddhism, believe in no God creator. But then after studying about Christ, now believes in or leaning towards Jesus. I would reverse all of that comment around. We don't believe in karma, we understand it. We don't believe in Buddhism, we understand it. We don't believe in the Buddha, we understand he is the teacher and his teachings, the Dharma, and the Sangha, representative of that Dharma. This is understanding, knowledge of. The idea of Jesus himself was just another man, a teacher, whom you don't have to believe in. This is also documentarily evidenced. He came 500 years after the Buddha, so more easily accessible historic records. The Romans were around at the time, so there's all sorts of information about him as a man. But what he said had to be believed in. His teachings, a lot of them, no, they're just logical. Treat your neighbours as you would like to be treated by them. You reap what you sow, and so on, which is really the idea of karma. That's basic morality. And even to some extent, the nature of prayer could be considered like meditation. But it is revolving around the belief of a creator God and external help. So whether you want to keep him in your heart, it's not still you just really learning about him or not, converting. You don't have to convert to Buddhism, you don't have to convert to Christianity. Like I was saying earlier, all of this is just conventional labels. Frankly, it's all nonsense. It really is, because you're just practicing whatever it is you've come to learn is a good way, a good philosophy by which to run your life and live your life. And if that involves keeping the precepts, practicing meditation and developing wisdom, which if you're already a practicing Buddhism, it does, then understanding the teachings of Jesus as well is okay, but not necessary, and might be confusing if it's causing you to question why you don't believe in what he was teaching, or bringing up anything for debate to conflict with what you're already understanding about the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, which can be experienced and seen for yourself within this lifetime. So I don't know whether I've interpreted your question quite correctly, but can you keep Jesus in your heart without converting to Christianity? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Why would you? No one's telling you. Maybe they are telling you you have to convert and abandon all previous views. I think anyone telling you that is, I don't know, after something other than your own well-being. Because what is the point? What is the necessity of that? You can just be you. Because you know that you is not even a thing. There is no personality there, there is no person there. There's no Buddhist, there's no Christian, there's no Muslim. There's just this human life of experience, and how we use that experience, what we do with regards to all of our actions of body, speech and mind, is the causes and conditions for the future and what happens next. And that's the same for all beings. So just drop the labels and then there's no question. Just be you in the full knowledge that you're not even you, if that makes any sense. I don't think there's many more questions, so I'm going to try and finish them all. Oh, here we go, this one. Isn't there no free will in Buddhism? This question of free will comes up time and time again, I think, in Buddhist forums. And I went to a lay Buddhists meeting once at the monastery where I used to go regularly, and it put me off being a lay person for the rest of my life, because they managed to spend a whole day meeting all together in groups and discussing, and then all getting together at the end, having huge great debates and arguments, it seemed, and discussion on this aspect of, is there free will in Buddhism? Okay, all and each and every being, living being, has free will. You can decide to watch this video or not, as I can decide whether to record this talk or not. The cat can decide to go and sleep in there in its little corner, or it can go and run around. It's its choice. This is free will. It doesn't matter whether you're Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, whatever. Again, drop all the labels. Free will itself has become a conventional label for discussion, like duality and non-duality. The meanings of these words gets lost in philosophical debate and theories. What's that popular thing? Conspiracy theories. Almost free will and these popular terms, pop culture terms, pop culture terminology like free will, dualism, non-dualism, blah, 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 all become, even Vipassana nowadays as such, and mindfulness, all become very popular and then lose their real meaning as to what they are. But free will means you've got the absolute opportunity to do whatever you want with this life. You have the choice to all of your actions of body, speech and mind, your voluntary intentions are your decision. But what you cannot control is the physical nature of your physical body, or even your thinking brain in terms of the thoughts that will come up. But they are going to be resultant of the causes and conditions you put in place. So those that have busy thinking minds and say they can never meditate because they have busy thinking minds is because they never meditate. The more you meditate, the less busy and thinking your mind, that monkey mind, is. And the easier meditation becomes. But the quality of that tranquil, peaceful, calm mind remains, and eventually consistently throughout all of your activities of body, speech and mind, throughout all of your days. And this is the practice that we're continually developing these qualities with, through this continued practice. So what's this opposite of free will? Predetermined. So have you experienced that? All things are the result of what you've done. You may be guided to do something by others and pointed in a direction. You may follow false hopes, or you may follow very successful routes to whatever it is you're aiming for. But you still made that decision, that choice. So it's a double negative, so I'm not sure whether you're asking if there is free will in Buddhism or there's not free will in Buddhism, but all beings have free will. They may not be great thinkers. I mean, a fish going around and around in a goldfish bowl may not be thinking much about its actions, but it can turn around and go the other way if it wishes. Nothing is really determining that fish's action. We are also governed a lot by habitual behaviours, instinctual behaviours, but instinctual behaviours are often habitual behaviours which have become habits in previous lifetimes. So procreation, defensiveness, aggression, attacking, hunting, to eat. These are natural instinctual behaviours. The basis of our root defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. But not so much pre-programmed by an external force, but become habits, are habitual from previous experiences within this lifetime and in previous lives. But even with those, you still always have in the present moment, here and now, the choice as to how to act upon those instinctual, habitual behaviours. So there is free will, whatever your religion or whatever being you are, sentient being. So someone, because of daylight saving, they can't join me for the morning chanting, short meditation and blessings, I guess, anymore. But you can look at these any time. They are available always. So if you wake up an hour later, still just switch it on. It may not be live, but it's still to some extent the same. The comments I don't see. I don't know whether you know that. Some people make comments on those during that time, or just at the end of it, because during the time maybe you should just be meditating. But I don't see them anyway. They don't. The live streams don't store comments, so they don't come to me. Unless you make the comments on the recorded version, then I think they do. But they are recorded. I don't record them, they're live streamed, but they're then available for you to watch any time. So please just use them as little timers or ways to do your meditation at home and make the best you can of them. And I'm going to just go through this one. There's a long description of, I received this by email and a comment, someone's experiences of meditation. Phenomena that are coming up during meditation. And I'm not going to read it out because we've all experienced this when we first meditate, and it's all the kind of different phenomena that goes on when you find that the meditation object of the breath becomes very subtle and you start to become absorbed, but then you feel floaty and light and the lights appear and everything, and you get a little bit frightened and scared, and then you stop the meditation because you have a fear of getting deeper into meditation. And the question is, because of this fear, I often stop my meditation midway. Please guide me. Is this normal part of meditation? Is it safe to go deeper, or should I be concerned? Meditation is safe. There's nothing, you can do yourself no harm, no others harm to anyone else, assuming you're just meditating at home. I mean, don't be meditating on a railway track or in the middle of a fast lane, of course, but just meditating at home to yourself, in the mind, in the brain, in the physical body, you can do yourself no harm. The phenomena is often mind generated, much like dreaming, if not even dreaming, and people are just dozing off. It's actually where you're losing mindfulness through meditating with some. People think they're getting deeper and deeper, but they're just falling asleep. They're losing mindfulness. If the breath is just becoming very, very subtle, unnoticeable, because you're breathing very slightly as a result of having a lot of calmness and tranquility, then you can still be observing the breath. The only time you'll not notice the breath is when you really absorb into samadhi and into jhana, when you will feel physically lighter, but only by way of a kind of relief of physical feelings. The mind will feel freer and emptier because of the relief of thought, thinking. This seclusion we get in jhana from the 5 hindrances and bodily feelings. Anything other than that is really just mental phenomena and distraction, much like dreaming, that you should just allow to happen, recognize, find the breath. It's still there. You're alive, so you're still breathing, bringing your conscious awareness back to the breath, and that will go away. It will dissipate. So it might feel nice, and that's where many meditators just stop, because it feels nice. They call it samatha because it's tranquil, it's calm, they're light, and it's almost a feeling of high, a natural high. But it's also, as a high, like a drunkenness, an intoxication of good feeling. It's a liking, an attachment, a clinging to what is conditioned. It's conditioned to that situation you're in. And you will have an attachment to it and want to achieve it again if you cling to it. So you just see it as a phenomena arising, even if you have to label it as a feeling or something you're experiencing by seeing, or sounds you are hearing, or thoughts you're thinking about. But what it isn't is clearly seeing the breath and the impermanent nature of the breath. To some extent, the suffering of the breath. As you breathe in, you have the need to breathe out. And as you breathe out, you have the need to breathe in. This is unsatisfactoriness. Otherwise, just one breath in would be sufficient. You're continually having to breathe. That's dukkha, evident there. Breath is impermanent, dukkha, suffering, and you can't control it. It's slowed down and becomes subtle of its own accord through your meditation practice, as the body settles and the mind becomes calm with time. You can observe this, rather than involving yourself, attaching yourself, and clinging to the phenomena that's arising, which to a large extent is the loss of mindfulness of the breath and the drifting into the world of dreams and mental phenomena of that nature. Now, that's not to say there aren't some wonderful meditative experiences that come along also on the way through samadhi and towards the jhanas, but these too should just be passed through and ignored, not given any credence to, because they're just obstacles on the way. By clinging to them, becoming attached to them, you'll go no further. So ignore them, get back to the breath and carry on. That's how you change your practice. If you feel you're stopping because you don't like the situation, it's through aversion. Many people carry on meditating because they like that situation, and it has the same negative effect. They don't go any further. So either way, it should just be ignored, these phenomena. Label them. It's just phenomena. It's either the physical body giving you sensation or the thinking brain giving you distraction. It will soon pass. Do you miss having a nice warm shower? No, I haven't had a warm shower for many, many years. And I wouldn't miss a warm shower here because it's so extremely hot all of the time, all day and all night, all year round. The water is actually not that cold because the water has to come out of the ground, out of the well. So it's never really cold. When it's raining and a little bit of a breeze, it's pleasant temperatures here. And I feel cold, but only by comparison. The actual temperature compared to what I'm used to back in my own country is that of a hot summer's day, even when it's at its coldest here. So no, I don't miss cold showers. And even when I was living in England on the beach there, I only had cold water to wash in, either the sea or there was this external tap for giving water to dogs. There was even an external shower on one of the toilet blocks for surfers and things like that from the sea. And when that was available or on or open, even in the winter, I'd use that for washing. So I had cold showers there too. So some people have cold showers as a practice, part of their practice. I have them because that's all I have. I haven't had much choice in that matter for many years now. What do you think about breatharians? Do you think it is possible. I don't think about it at all. I'm not even sure I know what it is. I think it's people who, like vegetarians, live on vegetables. Breatharians just live on the breath and nothing else. Well, it's not what I think about it. I kind of know that's not possible, whatever you might read or understand. Maybe for a short period of time, we don't have any solid food in the afternoon. So that's for 24 hours until the next day. So it's not really even fasting, it's only 24 hours. But people can fast for 3 days, not eat any solid food, but they generally need water. I suppose you can go a good few days, but that's not like vegetarianism. You can go for the rest of your life on living on vegetables, usually without much difficulty. Even a veganism, you can go for the rest of your life without much difficulty. You cannot go for the rest of your life just living on breathing. You're going to have water, you're going to have some kind of nutrients. Whatever you might see on the internet, and however long an individual can sustain that for, is irrelevant. It cannot be sustained for the rest of your life comfortably, like vegetarianism or veganism. So if that's the right understanding of the word, which I could be wrong, then it's a pointless exercise. It's like saying, can you live without breathing? And saying, yes, yes. And then showing someone you can hold your breath for 1.5 minutes. Well, you've only held your breath for 1.5 minutes, haven't you? It's like people saying that they're celibate because because they refrain from all sexual activities for 24 hours. Well, they're only celibate for that 24 hours, not for the rest of their lives. They haven't made that determination, that adhitthana, to keep that precept for the rest of their lives. So it's not possible, if that's the last bit of your question. And finally, as a fellow Englishman, I have to ask, what has your experience been like becoming a monk from this country? I think probably the same as becoming a monk from any other country, and I would say makes no difference much whatsoever. We're just, when we're in Asia, us foreign monks, we're just foreign monks, foreigners, and that's why this channel is called English Buddhist Monk, because the most common question I am asked is, what country am I from? In all of my years of travelling around, that is what I'm asked always. Not in relation to Buddhism, long before I was a monk. As a white person in a whatever coloured country, you're asked which country do you come from? And I say England, UK, just to be clear as to where I come from. And that's always been greeted with very welcoming responses and encouragement that I've come all this way, because it is a long way to come, and it is understood by most people that I'm from a very different cultural background to them, so they're very supportive and encouraging of my practice in that sense, and also that I'm practicing a life of full renunciation and austerity, which isn't necessarily always the experience of many Buddhists and Buddhist practitioners and their local city sanghas who have and are responsible for many other duties in society, and often not really representative of the path of practice that I demonstrate here with regards to this way of life, a simple renunciant way of life of just meditation. And that just about rounds up the comments for today. Until next time, if they're useful, please use them. If not, just let them go. Be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.